Hello, everyone. It's 1 p.m. Eastern. That means it's time to begin our 83rd CoCoRaHS Weather Talk webinar. A very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. I'm your host, meteorologist Henry Regis. Running the technical side of our program is our very own Noah Newman. We're coming to you live from the Colorado Climate Center in Fort Collins, Colorado. All of our Weather Talk webinars are sponsored by the generous donations of listeners just like you, and we're very thankful for that. Today's webinar will take a look at weather broadcasting techniques to best connect with the viewer. And this will be done by two longtime experts in the field, good friends of ours, Todd Glickman and Craig Allen of WCBS Radio, located in New York City. Todd Glickman's career spans more than 40 years as a part-time radio meteorologist for All News WCBS News Radio 88 in New York City. Outside of radio, Todd joined MIT Corporate Relations and its Industrial Liaison Program in January of 2000, where he is currently their Senior Director. Prior to his current position, he was the Assistant Executive Director of the American Meteorological Society in Boston. While there, Todd was Managing Editor of the AMS Glossary of Meteorology, the second edition. He earned his Bachelor's of Science in Earth and Planetary Sciences from MIT and an Executive MBA from Suffolk University in Boston. Todd's interests include transportation systems of all types, and he is an officer and past trustee of the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine. Our other guest today is Craig Allen, who's a meteorologist with WCBS News Radio 88 in New York. He also does freelance forecasting for the News 12 networks. Craig has been with the WCBS since 1981. He is now the longest running primary meteorologist on a radio station in the country. Craig graduated from Farmingdale High School on Long Island, go Dalers, and earned his bachelor's degree from Stony Brook University in 1979. Craig volunteers as a gardener for his local civic association and works with several nonprofit and charitable organizations, including the Long Island chapter of Autism Speaks, Island Harvest, and Animal Rescues. Let's give a big CoCoRaHS welcome to each of our guests. Todd, Craig, it's great to have each of you with us today. Really appreciate you joining us. So as these guys are two big Mets fans, so we'll have to ask that question. And I grew up on Long Island, so we have that connection there with a lot of those things. So we're going to ask you two questions. One is about the Mets. Todd has an interesting story about that. And then how did you guys become interested in weather? So, every meteorologist seems to have a story somewhere back in their childhood, and we always ask that of our guests. So we're going to turn it over to you guys now and ask you to take it away.
You want you want the smart one to go first? That's Todd.
No.
He's got more degrees than I've already gone. All my years of school. But go ahead, Todd. Tell him.
I'm so old. I switched to my age in Celsius. So I too grew up in Long Island, and I was not a baseball fan in high school, but I was a transportation fan, and I loved the school buses in our school district. And when I graduated, and I came to MIT, but I went back to Long Island to Roslyn Heights, my hometown, and got a job driving a school bus summers in between my college years. And we would very often pick up charter trips for police groups, firemen, you name it, over to what was then Shea Stadium. And so I would drive over to Shea Stadium with this group of firemen. I get paid for it. We get into the stadium for free, and we'd have a terrific time at the game, and I get paid for it. And I very quickly became a Mets fan. While at the same time, my high school classmate, Rick Miner, was executive producer of Kiner's Corner.
Oh, do I remember that?
Wow, yeah.
Come down to the studio and watch them do Kiner's Corner live. And it was fascinating to watch how they would have to coach Ralph Kiner to answer the questions, because, he loved baseball, but when
he was a baseball guy, but he wasn't a TV guy, right?
When they play him, Name That Bridge is at the Throgs Neck of the Whitestone, he'd call it the Triborough.
Okay.
So that's how I became a Mets fan.
Okay. My story's shorter than that, actually. It's just very simple. My dad, he watched them, right from the very beginning. What was it, 62? And I just very much became a Mets fan at that point. And following in my father's footsteps also, he was in hockey. He was a Rangers fan.
Oh,
And so I was a Rangers fan at the beginning as well. But then as soon as the Islanders came along in 72, that's when I became rapidly an Islanders fan, because I was in Massapequa at that time. And I've been an Islanders fan ever since. But Mets, I can't begin to express my disappointment so far this year. But hey, I'm a New Yorker, so let's go Yankees. Let's get it done, right? So
There we
that's
go.
where I stand with that. So that's the sports part of it. As for weather, my story is, whenever I give a talk, the first thing I do is I ask the group. I said, when did you get your start in weather? When did you become interested in weather? And I'll give an age bracket, like about 5 to 12, 12 to 20, and then anything beyond that, if anyone's trying to change their career or just make a move in their career. Most people raise their hand, like I would, between 5 and 12. It just seems like it's something ingrained, something that you have, a feeling that you get, that the weather is just fascinating. And there's, again, there may be something very geeky about that, because Todd and I also found out that when you like weather, you also seem to like trains and transportation, and we both do. Me?
Probably maps, right? Did you read maps as a kid?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, me
Yes,
too. Yeah.
we were doing that, and I was my story in my bio, and Todd could give you his too. But when I was only around 10, 11, 12 years old, I was watching all the guys on TV, and back in those days, it was Bob Harris was on, Tex Antoine, Frank Field. These were the guys that I watched growing up, and I had a chalkboard, just about that size. It was a little smaller than a Bob Ross painting, but I etched out the United States on the chalkboard, and then every night would come down to the dinner table with highs, lows, fronts, everything on there, and give a weather forecast before dinner to the entire family. And I don't know if they were really thrilled about that as we kept going on and on and on in years, but that's my beginning. It was just there. I had it. I wanted to do weather. I was afraid of thunderstorms as a child, but I quickly gained knowledge of what they are and how they work. And now I would think today that, yes, I like snow, and yes, I like hurricanes, and I like forecasting. Don't get me wrong, I don't like what they cause, but I happen to be a big thunderstorm fan. So that's my story, going back to way in the younger years.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that. I again, growing up on Long Island too, I was afraid of thunderstorms. Our house got hit when I was 8 years old, and that got me interested in weather at that time. And so, but now my wife is like, come on, get in, you're going to get hit. I'm always
Right.
taking pictures and stuff like that. As you learn more about the stuff, you get interested in it. So
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like I know more than the production of a thunderstorm, and I know where lightning's going to hit, but you will find me on the roof, taking pictures or watching a thunderstorm until I deem that it's a little too close. And of course, I'm now breaking the 30-30 rule completely. I would tell anybody to get off a field, anyone that's playing baseball or a concert, or they're playing soccer in the fields around here. Obviously, my job is to keep them safe, keep them informed. But I'm the dummy that goes up on the roof until I say, you know what, that one was too close, and then I get back inside the house. But that's just my fascination for weather. That's just the way I am.
yeah,
So
I think a lot of it, it's funny you mentioned too about the maps, making them, or the forecasts and stuff like that. As a kid, I remember a lot doing the similar things where you take a map, you draw the cold fronts, and I would watch Tex Antoine and Frank Field as well. getting that stuff and just trying to emulate that. So it's great you guys went into broadcasting and are doing this yourselves right
You're
now.
doing it just the way they did. And Todd, who were your favorites in this area when you were growing
again,
up?
I'll mention Frank Field and Harry Wappler.
Yep.
Was on, and Alan Casper.
Yes.
Alan
Yes.
Casper, sure.
But the interesting thing is that I was not a weather geek when I was very young. I enjoyed it, in summer camp. We had a little weather station. I'd always look at it and so forth. When I got to, I guess you'd call it junior high, in 8th grade, I went to Wheatley in the East Williston School District in Long Island. We had an earth science class, and one of the units was the water budget, where it was really about hydrology, but it kind of eked into meteorology, where the teacher would talk about how water would evaporate and it would be transpired from the clouds and go up into the clouds, and it would rain and so forth. But we did it quantitatively with tables and numbers. And I was really fascinated by this. And it was always an interest. And when I got to MIT for my undergraduate work, it was kind of in the back of my mind, but I really wanted to pursue computer science because I had taken a course in Fortran over at Adelphi University as a high school student. And I was looking for a project to do where I could practice my Fortran. And the first one I came upon was a professor of meteorology, Fred Sanders, who became my advisor. And I did some coding of Fortran for a graduate student in a computer model of a cumulonimbus cloud, of a thunderstorm, and became fascinated by it, so that by the second half of my freshman year, the professor said, hey, you should take my class in meteorology. And that was the whole path there. But the other interesting thing is I was never interested in being in television. and except for having done fundraising for a local PBS station here in Boston, I've never done television weather. But I was fascinated as a kid by radio. And on WOR, when we were growing up, was the best storyteller in the world, Gene Shepard, at 10:06 or whatever every night. And I'd say to my father, can I listen to Shep tonight? And he'd say, only for an hour. Yeah, right, Dad. Can only listen to Shep for an hour. I don't think so. And the ability to paint the word picture was just such a fascinating thing for me. And we also listened, because the radio stayed at the same spot on the dial, WOR in the morning, to John Gambling, a show called Rambling with Gambling, which was
I remember that one. Yeah.
a live standard morning drive radio show with hosts and news and traffic and weather and sports. And I recall when I was 15 or 16, I said to my mother, I would love to see how that is produced. And back in those days, you could do this. She called the radio station, got a hold of the PR lady, and told my mother, sure, bring him in. So at the age of, I think I was 15 and a half or so, I went in to watch John Gambling do a show at 1440 Broadway. And part of the deal was they had a live weatherman come in, and I watched him do the radio. His name was Bob Harris. And 6.5 years later, I took his job on WCBS.
Wow.
During a whole nother story, but
Yeah.
that's
for another webcast. That's for another webinar.
That'd take another hour.
Yeah.
So that's how I got interested in weather and radio.
So there you go, Henry. That just proves my point that he's the smart one. But also, I just wanted to mention that as of now, as of what we're doing right now, at 1:15 in the afternoon, God bless him, Frank Field is 99 and a half years old, living in Florida and doing just fine. Isn't that incredible?
Yep.
Yeah, that's wow. I didn't realize he was still with us. That's
he
great.
is still with us. Yep.
Yeah, he used to be Channel 4, right? On
Right.
Yes.
NBC.
Yes.
He would appear on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show as NBC cracked meteorologist.
Right. That's right.
Wow. And Craig, you did a little bit. I remember the CBS morning show, right?
Yeah. The funny thing is that Todd and I have just a tremendous history with WCBS 880, and yes, I started with radio. I guess I had the TV bug in me because of what I did, with the chalkboard and at dinner time and trying to describe weather maps. I bounced around. I use this line a lot. I bounced around TV about as much as the hurricane hunters were bouncing around in Ian. I really did a lot of different stations because that was all freelance, basically, because there was nothing that was going to take me or Todd or any of us, that love 880. There was nothing that was going to take me away from that. It was a great job right from the beginning till now. Obviously, it has changed tremendously, and that's what Todd and I will talk about. But I think that if you want to go through the resume, yes, I did WCBS TV for a while. I did mornings and then I did weekends. I did the network from 96 to 99, and I don't feel I was ready for that at all. But somehow or another, I did network with Mark McEwen and Jane Robelo, and it was wonderful. I mean, I enjoyed it, but I just wasn't ready for network TV. And then after that, that's when I just began freelancing. I'm back on WCBS for a while. I did Fox, I did Pix, and now, just in my waning years, I'm doing News 12 as a fill-in because I enjoy all the people that I'm working with there. And one of the enjoyable things about working with News 12 is that there are so many kids, and I call them kids, obviously, that are coming out of the colleges, and I'm watching them with their journalism, and I'm watching them with their meteorology courses, and coming out, and some of them are good and some of them need work, but I'm there to mentor them the same way that the Bob Harrises and the Frank Fields mentored me, and I really enjoy, turning that around. So I find it enjoyable, and I'll keep freelancing for them as long as I want, and I'll keep on 880 for as long as they want me.
And I'll keep on 880, Craig, as long as you want me.
Okay, no problem
really
at all. By the way, Todd.
Yeah.
By the way, next week, no, I'll get to you. I'll do that purpose when we're private. Yeah.
It
I gotta
wasn't.
ask you guys, are there many all news radio stations still on the air across the country? I know, you guys are one of them, but I haven't heard many as I've traveled.
Yeah, this is WBZ in Boston, KNX Los Angeles, KCBS in San Francisco, WTOP in Washington, D.C. And many of them have transitioned from AM to FM.
Oh, really?
You probably saw the news that our sister station, WINS 1010 Winds, is going to be simulcasting on FM beginning in a week or so.
Yeah, towards the end of the month. Oh, no, the 27th. You're right. Yep.
So we're the only city that has two competing, if you will, all news stations. Used to be that way in Los Angeles, but now we're the only city, and both stations still make a lot of money. It's not as profitable as it used to be, but it's still obviously viable for our parent company.
And WCBS FM was oldies, if I remember, back in the
still is
80s, right? Is it still on?
It still is, and WCBS HD 2 or 3 is the simulcast for All News 880,
right,
for News Radio 880. But Winds 1010 Winds is actually going to be on 92.3. You won't have to go to HD radio, so they'll be simulcasting over there on that end. And like Todd said, we were competing stations at one time, but now we are all owned by Odyssey. So Odyssey, I think, is probably the only group in the United States that has their, that we're together, their own two all news stations. And I think WCBS is no longer called All News because we are now News Radio 880, and that's because we are doing baseball. We have the Mets contract, and we do some overflow sports from this Odyssey network, and I think we're very proud of that too. But I don't think any other, like Todd said, I don't think any other state or city has all news stations, especially not two.
Right.
But it's just becoming less and less and less across the country. They're going into something else during the nighttime hours, or they just broadcast something else completely. It could be talk radio, it could be sports. That's what seems to be happening right now. We are definitely unique here in New York.
Yeah, I remember Winds used to have that sound like at the top of the hour. There was a certain, like a xylophone sound, or maybe it was CBS radio. I can't remember if you guys did that or they.
Oh, did the sounder. We had that. Todd's got a whole. He kept all the sounders. I think.
Really?
I think he he wanted him to play and make you remember. and just bring back the old days. Todd's got them all on tape.
They're all on my website, toddglickman.com. You can go look at them, search for Todd's audio files.
I will do that. That's great. Well, guys, really appreciate you taking the time today to be with us. And this is, it's just great to talk about this stuff and really just before we go, and before the end of the webinar, maybe I can get you guys to do a quick, forecast like you would do on the air, traffic and weather together and type of thing, just what would we like giving so people can see what as you give a quick and here's today's weather, or paint the picture.
Right, absolutely. And that's something to definitely continue on with what Todd mentioned about painting the picture. I think radio helped me tremendously for TV, because if it wasn't for radio, you wouldn't be able to describe the weather in terms or in a way that the public can fully understand. I am so tired of hearing something like, what a beautiful day for the game today, isn't it? So-and-so, mostly sunny and warm this afternoon with highs near 80. You're right, Larry, or something like that. That's just not going to bring in the audience. And I think Todd and I have really honed our skills. I'm trying to be humble here, but Todd and I have honed our skills in that. And that's the way you get the people to listen. You relate to them. You talk to them like they're standing in front of you, not just that one little script that's standing in front of you. So that's the way we do it. I'll be more than happy to do it, Todd. Yeah.
Sure. I remember Todd giving a paper at the AMS Broadcast Conference in 1996, my first one I ever went to in Boston. And he talked about painting the picture, but then about words that, it's not good rain, or you would kind of, wet rain.
Shower activity.
Shower activity.
Talked about shower activities. We'll talk a little bit about that in the slides we're going to put up in just a minute. But I also want to mention one of the other differences between WINS and WCBS is that WINS is more short form, and WCBS allows us to be more long form. And a great tribute to that is a lot of the special events that we do. And so a little bit of promotion here. The next time that I'm going to be on WCBS will be in a couple of weeks on Sunday, the 6th of November. It's the New York City Marathon. And every year for some 30 years, WCBS has asked me to go to the finish line at Central Park and work with our reporters. And I'll be doing the weather live every 10 minutes, starting probably about 7 a.m. up until noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, where we have the ability to spend a little bit more time and talk about how the weather is not only affecting people out there watching the race, but how the weather is affecting the marathoners. And that's a tribute to WCBS that it allows us to take the time to do that. And as Craig said, paint the word picture that describes how the weather is affecting people and affecting events.
And the viewers out there can go to the WCBS website and listen to the broadcast. You guys.
Yeah, well, it's now, we've transitioned to an app on your iPad or iPhone or what have you. It's Audacy, AUDACY. You pull down the app and then you get to select your radio station from anywhere in the country, as well as a lot of podcasts. And if you select the WCBS live stream, then you'll hear us. So again, that's going to be Sunday, the 6th of November.
All right. I'll try to remember that and make sure we're listening in. So that sounds great. Well, why don't we go ahead and start your presentation? We can take questions afterwards. And again, we'll catch up with you guys. I'll go on radio silence for a while, and then we'll at the end there we'll go from there.
Okay, can everybody see that?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good thing. So just as a quick introduction, I gave a talk at an AMS Broadcast Conference in Clearwater, Florida, and I believe the year was 1984.
Yep.
And I was on the AMS Board of Broadcast Meteorology then, helping to evaluate tapes of people who wanted the AMS seal of approval, which is now transitioned to the certified consulting meteorologist. And I, as a radio person, thought that part of the value I could add to that process was how well the TV weathercaster was doing based on his or her use of voice and descriptions and explanations and not relying on the graphics. And so the title of that talk was The Graphics Boom, How Not to Go Bust. And then what Craig and I did is we put together this presentation, which we call the sequel, for the 100th meeting of the AMS just a couple of years ago, literally weeks before the pandemic shut everything down.
Right.
Here in
We probably spread it, but I won't get into that.
well,
So
it was the middle of January of 20,000,
yeah,
or 2020 rather, and the weather was just gorgeous. I think it got to 65 degrees a couple of days.
there was record-breaking 70 or so. I think with one day that we were there. By the
Yeah.
way, there were over 1,000 people there, right? I believe
Right.
5,000 people.
5,000.
Yeah. And then the last day that we were there, I remember it snowed. So yeah, it was quite a weekend that we had there. And one other thing before you get started, Todd, I have to thank you personally right now and here and now, because it's your name and your signature on the bottom of my radio seal that's hanging up on the wall over here.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, so why are you looking at this? In radio, we don't use graphics. We use our voice to describe what's going on. So normally when we give this presentation to a live audience, I would like to say, would all the broadcasters in the audience please stand? And when we do this at a broadcast conference, almost all of them will. We did this at the AMS annual meeting, and maybe 100 people stood. And then I say, if you've never done a TV weathercast, now you can sit down. And who's remaining? Well, it's the few of us who only do radio. And there are a couple still left who only do radio. There's Mike Stiniford down at WTOP in Washington. There's Craig Mellish at WSB in Atlanta. And there are probably a couple of others around the country who have made radio either their career full-time or part-time like I have, and majority time like Craig has. And that's really the basis of what we're going to be talking about here. So what makes a good story of any kind? A story of any kind, you have to have a beginning. You have to talk about what's important, give people an overview. You need to have a middle, and that's the longest part of the story. What do you need to know with in-depth support to tell your story? And then at the end, you have to give the conclusions. In other words, what should people remember? What should they take away from their story? And going back to the AMS Broadcast Conference in Clearwater Beach, I talked about a couple of things. I talked about in radio, we describe what we're doing. In television, you just have pictures to support you. You should not be supporting the pictures. The other thing that I talked about, and I think this is more important today than it was then, is it really bugs me when a TV meteorologist gets up on TV and puts up the Euro model and says the Euro says this, and then puts up the GFS and says the GFS says that, and then puts up the Canadian, says the Canadian says this. And oh, by the way, here's my homegrown model, and my model says this, and never gives you the forecast. You know what, folks? The audience doesn't care what the models say. The audience cares what you say. What do you believe? What have you synthesized? As I learned from my advisor at MIT, the models are guidance. They are inputs to you to help you make your informed decision. So with that as background, now in meteorology, you are a storyteller, and you need a beginning, you need a middle, and you need an end. And it's always been said that in any kind of lecture or story, you need to make 3 points, because people aren't going to retain more than 3 points. And you have to make those 3 points 3 times. And my thesis and belief is that your 3 points should always be centered around how will the weather have an impact on them, their lives, and their activities. Now, you put up a TV weathercast in general, and this is not Craig's. What you will see is in the beginning, the current conditions,
right,
in the middle, the map, the model discussion, and at the end, the extended forecast. You lost me, folks. So Craig, why don't you pick it up and tell our friends here who are viewing and listening the ultimate TV weathercast, what we think is really important to do.
Go right to what is, as it says on there, the most important fact. And we have started to do this on News 12, where there is no longer a beginning, middle, and end in the way that we all know or see it so frequently on TV. If there are thunderstorms approaching, severe thunderstorms, if there is a snowstorm approaching, do not start with the current readings and go backwards into the almanac and say, hey, today's high was 43 and it's dropping, tonight. Don't go backwards like that. That's not the important part of the story that people want to know right away. And there was an old theory that was deemed necessary, that you need to keep people, keep teasing them into hang on, I'll give you the forecast. And a lot of people still to this day say, and I'll have that 5-day forecast for you coming up. And yes, I do that too. There is a need for that every once in a while. But if there's something major approaching, go right to it. Go right to your radar. Go right to, well, if satellite is interesting, like Ian was extremely interesting, you start with Ian. Don't start with anything else. Go right to the satellite, the radar. Then you could backtrack a little bit and say, and here back home, or here, where we are, this is going to be moving in this direction, that direction. Look at the rain that's sitting here. Look at this over here. Look at the swirl here. I'm being very generic about it, but start with, as it says, the most important, and then go into describing why you think that's the most important. And this is where Todd said, don't just put up the maps and say something to the effect of, this is what this model says, and this model, and this model. And a lot of times they can be, we all know they could be very, very different. It's better that you draw your own graphic and have that graphic, with the arrows pointing, if it goes this way, in a little box down here, misses. Then a graphic here, then an arrow here, direct hit here, out to sea. Now that sounds like I'm avoiding the forecast, but it's not, because now you're explaining your own ideas rather than just putting up the weather maps, because the people don't fully, they do not, unless they are geeks like us, they do not fully understand what each model is and what each model is saying, and where that green goes, or the blue and the whites and so forth. It's better that you have your own words on there and describe it by yourself. And then at the end of that, this is probably Todd's most important point, is go with something that says, I believe it's going to take this track. You don't have to go into the details why. That you could figure out in your head while you're sitting around and preparing your forecast, whether you have a producer or not. Throw ideas back and forth. You got to talk to your news people, because that's another problem, is that once a watch or a warning comes out for your region, the newsroom goes bonkers. And if something is to happen, that a storm is approaching and it looks like it's going to go out to sea, you can't change that. It's just almost impossible to change that with the newsroom, because that snowball is already rolling down the hill. So you're going to have a ton of trouble if you don't give the news crew and your managers an idea of what you are thinking. And that's the same thing that you have to do for your audience. And there's another thing that, as Todd was talking before, and you're showing the models, a lot of times, I'm guilty of this, because you have this feeling of what you think the next system is going to do, is cherry picking the models. So if you think that there is going to be a big snow or a big rain, or there's some kind of coastal or nor'easter, I'm obviously referring to the East Coast right now, but this could be any kind of system for any of you all across the United States. I will say, if I think that this is going to hit hard, and I notice that the Euro hits the rainfall amounts or snowfall amounts harder, or WSI now has the graph model, and they have their own, a lot of people developing their own models, a lot of companies, I should say. If you want to cherry pick like that, at least give the reason why. Don't just say that, wow, look at this model and it says 15, but you know what? The GFS right now is still showing 0. Yeah, we always joke. Todd and I joke constantly. It could be 0 to 20 inches out there.
And sometimes it's true.
Yeah, and sometimes it's true because you definitely have a large area to forecast for. You're not forecasting for your own backyard, which is what a lot of people want you to do, but obviously that's impossible. So if you're going to cherry pick, at least give your reasons for picking that model and say, this really could be bad. So as you see it there on the left side of your screen, the beginning, the middle, the end, that's what you want to describe, and it does not have to be in the same order every single day. Nobody really cares about the almanac when you've got a 2-footer approaching your area.
And I'll add a couple things, Craig. Often on WCBS, our typical length of broadcast is 30 to 40 seconds. Sometimes
right.
At the top of the hour, 10 or 15 seconds. But if there's a big weather event going on, sometimes we'll get a minute to a minute and a half, especially at the top of the bottom of the hour. And if there's a weather event going on, which is oftentimes when I'm working, a big storm, whether it be a blizzard or a hurricane, whatever, I will nowcast. I won't even forecast. I will explain what is happening right now to everybody across our listening area and what's going to happen over the next couple of hours, because that's what people really, really care about.
Sure.
Especially if you're in a snow situation. It seems like every year we have something where the 0 to 20 really works out, because the Twin Forks of Long Island get 0. You go to Sussex County, New Jersey, they get 2 feet of snow. But everybody wants to know what's going to happen in Manhattan. And of course, that rain snow line, which is not a line, it's a kind of a transition zone, wavers, and you go from rain to sleet to ice to snow and back and forth. And it's impossible to predict with great accuracy.
Yeah, we are kind of stuck with that New York City centric type of forecast. And you really do have to branch out, because you and I cover an 18 county area in just our prime listening area. And then you know that there are people that are out there that are beyond that, like New London County or Pike County on the other side that are listening to our forecast as well. But a lot of the times, I'm sure a lot of meteorologists out there realize that your forecast becomes city centric. So whether or not you're in St. Louis or LA or Atlanta, you're forecasting for that city, but you've got to try to branch out and talk about what's going on in all the other areas in your county listening area.
Maybe what I'll do, Craig, is I've got one more slide. Let me show that. And then perhaps we could take just a couple minutes to recount what happened during Sandy, because
Sure.
we're coming up next week on the 10th anniversary.
Yep.
I know that our colleagues at WCBS Radio are putting together some great stories about that. But if I do one more thing here, and let's turn up the volume. Now, Craig and I, let's see, in spring of 2024, so in about 15 months, we will have a combined 88 years on WCBS, because currently I'm coming up on 43 and Craig's on 41, so we're sneaking up in there.
Yep.
But this is a little something that was done when we had a combined 50 years, just a mere half century.
Yes, what a century of experience watching the weather for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Craig Allen.
It could be 2 to as much as 5 inches of rain.
Todd Glickman.
Gusty northwesterly wind this morning will slowly subside.
Only on WCBS 880. We are News Radio.
Boy, do I wish I had that guy's voice. His name was John Wells, by the way, if anybody is interested. Craig, you want to talk a little bit about Sandy for a minute or two?
Yeah, it was an interesting, obviously it's one of our biggest storms here in our memory for the New York, Long Island tri-state region, as we call it here. We've had several hurricanes, obviously, in the past couple of years, and tropical storms, but Sandy is the one that everybody will remember because it did the most damage, and in the billions again. In today's dollars, I would think that it could almost be equivalent to the amount of money that was spent or lost in damage dollars as Ian, believe it or not, because of inflationary costs. But it destroyed this area, and nobody around here was ready for something like that because they didn't have it in their mind. Yeah, we were prepared for the storm forecast wise, but there are so many people around here that have just never been through anything like that. I waited out as long as I possibly could. As you know, at the top of this broadcast, I was talking about I'm the guy on the roof, watching things approach. But I was on the air, and power had already gone out, and I was using my generator at that point. And finally, by about 6 p.m. On that day, it just started getting so bad that the water was coming up. I live fairly close to the bay here on the south shore of Long Island, and the water was coming up, and it was a matter of, you know what, I got to leave. And thank goodness Todd was available for that. And when I came back the next day, fortunately, my house, which is an elevation of 9.1 feet, I think that 1/10 of a foot actually saved me as compared to some neighbors that are lower across the street and on the side of me, because the water got into the garage, but and there was lots of damage outside, but the house itself stayed basically dry. But Todd continued to work that next day as I helped neighbors, and we had no power whatsoever. And gas lines around here were over 3 hours long, not by car, people standing with their gas cans in their hands, trying to get some gas from whatever open station was possible. But Todd, thank goodness, was there to to take the reins that afternoon. And it was just a storm that I will never forget. And I don't know if you want to get, enhance the political side of this, but there was a problem. And I'll get into it. Not that the National Weather Service doesn't like to hear it, because I think they and the Hurricane Center, National Hurricane Center, actually changed the way they do things because of Sandy.
True.
Sandy was transitioning into a post-tropical system and making that sharp left-hand turn towards the New Jersey coast. And the Hurricane Center was passing it off to the local National Weather Service offices. So what went from tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings went to suddenly a high wind warning, because it was no longer considered tropical. And so, like I said, the Hurricane Center passed it off. And the politicians that don't understand this started telling people, okay, and I'm obviously, I'm not taking it word for word, and I'm not going to mention any names, but it was like, okay, people, we can calm down, take it easy. It's no longer a hurricane. We don't have to worry as much as the people down to our south. That's obviously paraphrasing, but that was the message that some of them were giving out. Meteorologists at that point were banging their heads against walls and tables, knowing full well that a transitioning post-tropical storm, whether or not you're going to start seeing a cold core or start seeing frontal bands or frontal systems within that storm, this thing was now exploding and taking up much more of an area, a larger area. And I think that may have actually stopped some people from evacuating when they should have. And ever since then, after lots of review and talk, the Hurricane Center now continues on with a system that was tropical until the system actually kind of dies. If I'm stating that correctly, Todd, until they say that there's no longer any kind of tropical remnants left, they will hold on to it and give briefings on it so that people know that, and call it a post-tropical storm, rather than saying it's no longer a tropical storm or tropical cyclone and therefore just passing it off. So I think some good really came out of Sandy.
Yeah, it's
I got a quick question. What do you do? Your area's got millions of people in it. So evacuation for something like this, where do people go? I mean, I know Long Island's got a long coastline. You got Manhattan, which is low, parts of Jersey. I guess you can go inland on the island. You're pretty much stuck.
You're pretty much stuck. The center of the island, in and around the expressway, is kind of high territory, if you want to
Sure.
put it that way. Our highest elevation on the island is about 450 feet, but obviously that's very, very helpful. So we went to friends. We tried to get on what's known as the Southern State Parkway, and trees were coming down in front of us all over the place. I was going to try to get out to my parents' house, but we ended up not going very far at all and got to a town called Wantagh, but it was at least 5 miles from the coast, and it helped. I mean, obviously, no electricity, trees down all over the place, but we stayed away from the surge flooding, which, by the way, is another topic that I spoke about just recently at the Tri-State Weather Conference. And I won't go too much detail in this, again, because I don't want to be short on time for questions, but the National Hurricane Center is starting to work on, I hope, more than just the Saffir-Simpson scale, because Fiona did not kill and cause as much damage as she did because she was a Category 1. It was because of the storm surge.
Mhm.
And as we deal with Ian, the same thing. Now, Ian was close to a Category 5 at one point, but you know what 60% of the unfortunate deaths came from? Storm surge and freshwater flooding, not the wind.
Always the water.
Yeah, it's always the water.
We've got a Weather Talk webinar that Jamie Rome, who's now the interim director of the Weather Service.
Yes.
He's done a lot of work on storm surge, and it's if you guys are listening to this, you can go back a couple of years ago and look to the viewers out there, the listeners. Pull up our Weather Talk webinar on storm surge by Jamie Rome. Very interesting, goes into all that stuff, and it's a good primer in that.
It's so important, and I think that if you don't want to put out 3 scales and say it's a Category 3 hurricane or a Category 4 hurricane with 150-mile-per-hour winds, it's also a Category 3 in terms of rainfall. It's a Category 5 because of the storm surge. That may get very confusing to the listener or anybody that's trying to take heed of what you're trying to say, but maybe a general impact category, and say the word. I know that they word it this way. The worst impacts will be. I mean, you could see that. I am not blaming the Hurricane Center at all. They do a fantastic job and did a fantastic job with these storms, but a lot of people in the Fort Myers area were expecting the worst of the storm surge to be up near Tampa Bay, and the worst of the winds were a little bit higher up the coast of Fort Myers, but Fort Myers got the worst of the storm surge because of their position and where Ian decided to make a little bit more of a right-hand turn. And so they were not fully prepared for that, at least in my opinion. It needed an enhancement scale for those poor folks in the Fort Myers area to know that don't worry about those 150-mile-per-hour winds, but you better worry about that 20-foot storm surge or 15 to 20-foot storm surge, or the folks that were just inland of 15 to 20 inches worth of rain that they've never seen before. Something has to be done about that. I am not blaming anybody, but I think that's something good to really be working on, so the public can be triply prepared for these tropical systems.
And Henry, just a quick footnote on Sandy. I was working the midday for Craig that day as well, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. while he was supposed to be resting, but I'm sure he was on his roof. And we were starting to see things. There was such incredible agreement between the models and consistency from run to run that we were very confident what was going to happen. And I was talking to colleagues and friends and eventually to our news director, WCBS, saying, we as meteorologists and as scientists are not trained to communicate certain things, such as cities and towns on the Jersey Shore that exist today will not exist tomorrow, or Lower Manhattan will be inundated with X feet of water and the subways are going to flood. And then, as Craig was starting to tell
you say, how do you do that? How can we?
Because you get a panic, right? If you get a panic, yeah, sure.
That's the emergency planners. But I was on the air when that politician, and I won't mention the mayor of the city of New York's name at this point, he did a press conference, and this is well documented, saying it's no longer a hurricane. Okay. And I called our news director and I said, can I tell our listening audience not to pay attention to the man behind the curtain? Because this is going to be as bad or worse than we have been describing when Sandy was a tropical system. And to our credit, our news director said, Todd, that's why we pay you guys, do what you got to do.
Right.
And I went on the radio that evening and said, pay no attention, because here's what's going to happen. Cities and towns, Jersey Shore will be destroyed. Lower Manhattan will be inundated, will be flooded. And this is going to be a tremendous disaster for much of the tri-state area that will take years, if not decades, to fix. And the New York subway system is still fixing, Sandy.
Yeah, that's right.
The tunnels,
The tunnels.
between New York, New Jersey, that Amtrak and New Jersey Transit run in, are so corroded from Sandy's salt water that
Right.
they're failing a lot quicker than they should. And it's going to be a huge problem. So
Wow.
Sandy is that marked storm that none of us thought we would ever see in our lifetimes, and knock on wood, we never will again.
And
So,
it was a
quick question.
category. It was a category 1, not only transitioning or down, but it was down. Oh, let me restate that. It was a category 1 going to tropical storm status, because the sustained winds just before hitting the Jersey Shore were about 74, 75 miles per hour, with
Right.
gusts to 90 across parts of Long Island. We know that for a fact, but it was already transforming. And so, you had all these things. This was not a 3, this was not a 4 or a 5. And look at the damage that we had up here. So again, there's a lot more that unfortunately we have to try to get across to the public. And I mean, all due credit to Todd for saying something like that, because I don't know if I would have had the cojones to say something like that. I think I would have, because that's my job. But it's to think of it now gives me goosebumps. It scares me to have to say that your town is going to be destroyed. How do you do that to people?
Wow.
Right?
Let me ask you guys, so in say other parts of the country, but I've seen in the metropolitan New York area too, you get tornadoes occasionally come
Wow.
through or stuff like that. Will you break in to a broadcast and go on live and say, we
Yes.
have, weather Doppler's got a tornado coming through Westchester County right now. How do you guys
Absolutely.
do with that?
Absolutely. And to a testament to that point is what's been happening around here. We've had more tornado reports around here in the last 5 years, whether it be funnel cloud or rotation noticed on Doppler, or whether or not we've actually had touchdown in many communities recently. But we will get on there, and what Todd said is we will get on there and talk about where the tornado warning is. The tornado watch, we start off with that, but a tornado warning obviously is a break-in category around here, because that too is very rare, or had been very rare until recently. And we will give, Todd and I are fantastic at this, trying to be humble, but we will talk about, here it is. It's going to be moving across 84, or it's going to be moving across Route 7 in Connecticut, or it's going to be going down the Garden State. It's going to be moving off the Garden State Parkway. Give people the right now, the right here, the right now, and something that they could relate to. It seems like people don't always know where a certain town is, whether it's northwest of them or south of them. But if you tell them the road, they know. And tell them that this right now is going to be crossing the 84 corridor or the expressway, or the Long Island Expressway, or something like that. That is something that Todd and I learned that people seem to be very grateful for, because we know the area around here. If you were to tell me, go be a meteorologist where you are, right now in Fort Collins or something like that, I would have to start from scratch.
Yep.
So, there's no way in the world that I would be able to do the same things that we do here. But that is very, very important. If you're an up and coming meteorologist, tell people where it is and give them landmarks, as well. Roads could be landmarks, and also places can be landmarks. This storm is going right across Jones Beach right now, something like that. So get off the beach. That's what radio is all about.
I only was able to do this one time in my 44 years, but it matched a couple of my interests. We had a hook echo, as seen by the Doppler radar, right over Valley Stream, which is pretty close to Kennedy Airport. It was heading due east. And the news anchor he set me up perfectly. And he said, "Where's it headed?" And I said, "It's headed to Rockville Center, Baldwin, Freeport, Merrick, Belmont, Wamco, Seaford, Massapequa Park, Emmett,ville, Copeg, Lindenhurst, and Babylon."
And if for those of you guys who don't know, that's the Long Island Railroad. And Todd, why don't you finish the rest of the, go ahead, give us the rest of the stations.
He did. That's the Babylon for you.
Bayshore, Islip, River, Oakdale, Sayville, Patchogue, Bellport, Mystic, Shirley, Santa Marcia, Spionk, West Hampton, Quogue, West Hampton, Hampton Bays, Southampton, East Hampton, Amagansett, and Montauk. But there you go.
There you go. Thanks for doing that.
The storm didn't make it that far, fortunately.
Yeah. Well, let's get some questions from our audience out there. If you guys have time to still stick with us a little bit, if you want to type in your question and put in your the state that you're in and your name, that would be great. If you want to go ahead and put those in, we'll take those and then we'll finish up. You guys got a few more minutes to stick around?
I do.
Okay. So I'm not seeing any questions. Let's see if anybody's got anything coming in here. All right. Well,
let me see if do I see anything on there? No, I do not right yet.
Oh, here we go. Let's see. So
I see the number 4 on there. Yeah.
Here's a person that lives in Quincy, Massachusetts. They said they have floodplains, I guess different sea levels.
Mm-hmm.
Should you guys mention that at all, I guess, for evacuation and stuff, when something's coming? I'm not sure of her Ann's question here.
Usually that kind of information is left to local emergency managers because they know their localities a lot better than we do. We provide input to emergency managers, but I think it's really apropos for the local officials to play that role. It's really a partnership that we have with them.
Okay. Here's one from Ray in Missouri, and they want to know, how long does it take to prep for your broadcast on average?
Depends on the weather, I would say. We start at 5 a.m. and we go from 5 to 10 and 4 to 7 p.m. basically, Todd and I, for the AM and PM commute. So if the weather is, there's a couple factors that go into it here. I could get up at 4:30 if there's a storm. I could definitely get up at 4:30 if there's not, because this is my home office here, and I prepare a lot of information before I go to sleep. And it also becomes easier when we go back to standard time because the maps come out a little bit, all the information comes out technically, an hour earlier. So I get to see a lot of that information before I go to sleep. And if it's nice and quiet, I can wake up at 4:30 and have the forecast in my head. And if there's nothing major has changed, I can type it in, by then. But if there's something going on there have been times that Todd and I have been going on through the night, and it could take, a good hour and a half to get all the information that we need to finally type something in as, and when I say type in, we do have to give the station hard copy. That's so that they have it too. So there's like official stuff that Todd and I will put on there. But I don't know about you, Todd, but I can get away with some nights, of getting 4 hours of sleep.
See, usually when you ask me to work, things are not as simple. Or if the radio station asks me to work. So what you're seeing behind me is the Zoom background of my home office here. And there's a magic little box there that allows me to broadcast from my home office, just like Craig has, into the radio station. I'm typically up at 4 to start the 5 o'clock shift, just because, I just want a little time to, strengthen the vocal cords after a couple hours sleep and to get things ready and make sure that all of the technical aspects are working, because sometimes the line will go down or what have you, and you have to figure out a backup. If I'm working at the radio stations, occasionally I'll do in New York. I'll be staying somewhere else in Manhattan because of where how the subways run at night. I will leave a lot of extra time just in case I miss a number 1 train, which runs at a 20-minute frequency. So oftentimes I'll be in the studio at 3:45 for a 5 a.m. start, but that's okay. We're happy to have more time than less.
Do you guys mostly broadcast from home nowadays? I mean, do you go into the office to do much of the
No,
broadcasting?
I'm not there very often. Most of the time it's from home, and that was even pre-pandemic.
Really?
So yeah, because of the split shift is the reason why I got set up. I was living in Bayside at the beginning and worked from there from an apartment, and then when I moved out here to Long Island, set up a whole office in here because the split shift would have been crazy, you know, to try to be on the air by 5 a.m., perhaps getting in as early as Todd had said. And then coming home, you know, finishing at 7 o'clock and then getting home and then, you know, going, laying down and getting right back up again. So I can't be more grateful to WCBS for setting us up at home. And of course, the technology has made that so simple today, the same way that right now, you know, we're doing, you know, this Zoom is the same, almost the same way we're doing it through the, you know, through the internet to do our work now on CoCoRaHS access units. And it sounds like we're right there in the studio.
Now, this little box, I don't know if you can see it down there. I could take that. It's smaller than a shoebox. I could put it in my suitcase and travel around the world to Bangkok, Thailand, and be live on the radio in New York, and you would never know it. And I did that once.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, it looks like we have another question coming in. Let me look at it here. I'm going to read the question here. I think that it said that folks are familiar with risk assessments and can recommend mitigation strategies to promote the importance of weather knowledge in their area. Plus, they usually work with key people. What are some of the ways that we can do this with the media?
Oh, okay. I see that from emergency management.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny because in the talk,
They're in Canada. They're in Thunder Bay, Canada.
Oh, okay. In the talk with the, if I've got the question correct here, with Western Connecticut State University, we were talking with OEM people there, and unfortunately, it goes, you know, if something goes wrong, it ends up going down the line, and from the top, the you know, the people who are running a city or so forth then send it down to, well, my OEM people said this, and then the OEM people say, well, the meteorologist said that. I'm not quite sure of a better way. Todd, you can jump in here, of a better way to communicate with OEM, and then should we as meteorologists talk directly to the politicians who are running a city and have to tell you to make these instant decisions, or I mean, OEM serves a tremendous purpose. I think that they would probably have to stay in the mix.
Yep. I would agree. It's a partnership. We're the scientists, we provide input, but it's really the local people that have the best knowledge of their communities and what the implications of severe weather is going to be.
Okay, so it looks like Monica's question there, she's trying to sell the idea of let me try that, look at it again, of mitigation strategies to promote the importance of weather knowledge. Is that, I wish, I don't know, Monica, if you're still on there, are you talking almost like what we do here in the States, the weather ready nation? That would be my question, because that's where the National Weather Service or Environment Canada or what have you, that's where they would come in and have to set up these. Yeah, they have to set up these programs for you, and you, it sounds like, based on the question that I see here, you would be a prime person to, you know, to speak to in trying to get help and trying to set it up with them. I think Weather Ready Nation is probably one of the best things that the National Weather Service has done in trying to get people, you know, more weather ready and weather knowledgeable.
Okay, we got a question, one coming in here from David in the Carolinas. He says he started to notice tornado warning fatigue in the general public. In other words, tornado warnings issues based on Doppler, and TV breaks in and they never verify this. Is there a better way to not issue tornado warnings unless they actually ground truth is confirmed? And that's a tricky question in itself.
It really is, because ground truth would mean that a tornado was seen on the ground. But the amazing thing about the NextRad Doppler weather radars which originally were just Doppler radars, now they have dual polarization, is their ability to see rotation within a cloud before that ground truth, or before you see a funnel drop out of the cloud. And that can occur in a period of seconds to minutes. And yes, you may be overwarning people, but I think it's less of an issue to overwarn people and have them take cover than to wait for the tornado to be on the ground, and then it may be too late. So this has been something that's been discussed ad nauseum. But I think given the science that we now have and the ability to quickly get the message out to people with the proliferation of smartphones and other devices, taking a precaution because something might happen is a whole lot better than not taking precaution because you don't want to overwarn someone.
I tend to agree with that. Yeah, I think that's probably the better way to go. And so you're getting more warnings now because we're seeing it better on Doppler radar. And it's something that when, prior to Doppler, we had very little information, only one thing to look for, and that was basically what we call the hook echo. And to see that on the old WSR 57s, you say to yourself, oh, there's something. But by then, that tornado could already be on the ground, whereas now we're seeing them as they are in the developing process. A signature is already starting to show, and the Weather Service, I think, probably in their best interest is to say, wow, I see a tornado signature here. We better get the warning out now, because like Todd said, it can only take 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and next thing you know, that is on the ground. So I'm more for that. I know that we get a lot of emails, and say, yeah, you broke into my program, or I didn't get to watch the rest of the game. But again, that's part of our job. Is the only way I could say. I mean, our job is to keep people safe and keep them from dying. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. So I don't have much of a problem, with doing something like that.
There's our new technology.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
This is from a talk that I gave at the AMS Broadcast Conference this last summer. And it's going to be reprised at the AMS annual meeting coming in December and January, about the history of weather information systems from the early 1980s to the middle 1990s when I worked at WSI. And this is one of the early weather charts in WSI here. I'll show you a couple other things. How about that? This is how we used to get our fax maps.
Boy, do I remember that.
Olden fax. And this was the printer we'd have in our office. This was an acoustic couplet, how we get our weather data at 300 baud, which was, and here when I was in college, when Craig and I were in college, this is how the weather data would come out at 75 words per minute. Words per minute, not characters per second, words per minute.
Yeah.
And we'd have a line of these things set up in the weather office. So we've come a long way, guys.
So I'm going to ask you the last question here for today. For folks out there, for students or young folks that would like to get into a radio broadcast for weather, as meteorologists, to do something like you guys do, what would you recommend? Should they work on voice lessons, say they have an accent or something, or what? I'm just curious what you would pass along to a listener out there who is up and coming and would like to eventually get into this type of field.
There was a time when voice mattered a lot. And there were several times in my career that different news directors were actually looking or listening elsewhere, as the case may be, while, and saying that Craig's voice is not radio worthy, like we heard the WCBS New York, you got to be deep and forceful. And I actually ran into trouble like that. Now, my voice is known, but that doesn't matter as much anymore. I really don't think, we hear all kinds on radio now, and some from any kind of twang to nasally, it doesn't matter. as long as you can get your point across and the public begins to trust you and like you, and feel good about you, I don't think the voice matters as much anymore. It's all a matter of trust now.
Yeah.
And I would think, go for it. Just go for it. A news director can tell from an audio tape or a videotape within 30 seconds whether or not you're going to get called back. It's just the way it is. You can send in a 5-minute demo tape or 10-minute reel of all the things that you've done, but unfortunately that decision is made within 30 seconds. So put your best foot forward, sound as good as you can, and don't worry about trying. Well, take journalism and take public speaking. There's nothing wrong with that. Did you, Todd? I did. I took public speaking.
I didn't, but I started the college radio station at MIT, and we had a mentoring program there, which was very similar.
Yeah. So I think that, if you want to, absolutely do so. If you feel that your accent is not sitting well with where you are because you're broadcasting for a larger area, or you've moved from New York, you started in New York and you wanted to go to your first market, and that could turn out to be, maybe it's Pocatello, Idaho, or maybe it is down in Texas, and you don't. Everyone knows that you are not from those regions. And,
don't say spritz.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So come up with the euphemisms that people use down there, and the terminology and stuff like that. Like, we will never use the term a blue norther here because it doesn't fit. But if you're in Texas, that is cold air running into the northern portion of the state at first, coming down straight down from Canada. Pick up on regionalities, if that's a word, so that you can get a better idea. And also, and I think this is unfortunate, but you're probably better off going to a service, especially if you're dealing with radio, going to a service now, because radio stations are not. Todd and I are the last of a dying breed. Yeah. And they're not. Radio stations, since they're owned by corporations now and not mom and pop, they are going with private services. And with that in mind, that's probably your best chance of getting on the radio. If you want to go TV, you could, there's movement in the TV field all the time. You'll probably be able to find something. It may be a small market at first, but then you just work your way up. That's my best advice after all these years. Todd?
Yeah, I guess I was blessed to have a mother who was really into proper grammar and diction and things. And when I first started on WCBS, I was 23 years old. She would call me up after and say, you don't say it's gonna rain, you say it's going to rain.
Right,
and the word
right.
To is pronounced as if it's TWO. And the word for, as in I'm going for, is pronounced as if it's FOUR. And she would call me once a day and say, you're saying yeah again. Don't say yeah.
Yes. My mother said that all the time. Stop saying yeah.
Right. So take somebody you trust and have them critique you. The other thing I did was, I was living in Boston at the time that I started on WCBS, and we had a co-owned station, WEEI, which was also CBS All News, that I was on at the same time. And we had this amazing newscaster by the name of Bob McMahon. He's well retired now, but he's still alive. I keep in touch with him. And he had this cadence of reading all news. And I would sit in my room or I'd sit in my car with the radio on, and I would parrot him. When he would say, WEEI News Radio 59 time is 12 minutes past 12. I would say what he said as he said it to try to imitate him. And I didn't want to imitate him to be him, but I thought that his technique was so good that I tried to teach myself what I thought was a good way of speaking on the radio. And hopefully I'd helped a little bit.
And the funny thing is that now, even those rules don't necessarily apply, because now we're using words that come up on TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that, and we're using all so SMH. I've said that on the air. It's like when someone says, "Wow, this rain hasn't stopped," and wasn't it supposed to stop? And I'll go, "Yeah, SMH." but this is just the way it is now. It has completely changed in that respect. I saw there was one question on there, Henry, if I might take a look at that real close. Michael Garfield said something about John Coleman's name, and he got into weather in Chicago back into 1970, and that's what interested him. So there are a lot of folks out there that we all took our our trademarks from. We took a little piece of this and a piece of that and a piece of each one, and try to put them into the best that you possibly can, and then develop your own style on top of that.
May John Coleman rest in peace. But
Yeah.
if you want the best impression of John Coleman in the world, our colleague in New York, Nick Gregory, does a better John Coleman than John Coleman ever did. Young man.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm going to ask you as we leave if you would each try to give us a quick 10-15 second forecast as you would do it on the air. So
Sure.
Want to take a shot at that?
All righty. So this is what I've got going for us for today. It's sunny here today, and it's going to be nice right on through the weekend. So here's the forecast that I've got written on paper for the hard copy. It says sunshine but cool, 54 to 58. I'm giving region-wide temperatures. I don't like giving one temperature because it doesn't apply for 18 counties. So I'll give a general range that'll encompass most of the area. So sunshine but cool today, 54 to 58 tonight. Clear, not quite as chilly as it was last night. Friday mostly sunny, and then Saturday mostly sunny. Sunday it's going to rain. So now what I'll do is I will take that and go. It is really nice outside right now. I mean, there's not a cloud to be found anywhere in the area. You can go a couple hundred miles. Our highs today about 54 to 58, a little breezy, but it's still nice. Tonight will be clear, not as chilly as it was the last couple of nights. I don't think we'll see frost around here during the night tonight. And tomorrow, mostly sunny, a little bit milder, 60 to 65. That's getting closer to normal. Saturday, mostly sunny and quite mild. It's going to be well up in the 60s. I wouldn't even be surprised if a spot or two hits 70 during the afternoon. But then Saturday's definitely going to be the better of the 2 days. Sunday, cloudy, with occasional rain or drizzle, and it'll keep it close to 60 degrees. So you see what I did there is just I'm talking to you. You're standing in front of me, instead of just reading off what's on that piece of paper in front of me. I think that's I mean, Todd and I we've been doing that, and I guess that's the best. Go ahead, Todd. Your turn.
Well, I can't beat that, Craig. So what I'm going to do, if I can find it here, we were talking about our love of the New York Mets. And
Okay.
I have back in 2009. When Citi Field opened, the radio station sent me to Citi Field to do a live remote from the opening there. Our anchor was Cameron Swayze.
Wow.
And Jenny Casola, our reporter. And I think I can play this. Let me see if it works.
We had a pretty good rainmaker working on the overnight period, though. That's held off for the time being. Pretty good weather for the CBS Radio Expo at beautiful Citi Field. Let's go live. WCBS reporter Jenny Casola is there with our crack weatherman, Todd Glickman. Jenny, you're first.
Well, it's a good crowd here. I've been talking to a lot of families, Mets fans, who say they're coming here to Citi Field today for the first time. The stadium is impressive. People are getting a chance to meet former Mets, Mookie Wilson, Darryl Strawberry, and others, and also get some useful health information. Right now, I'm looking at the WCBS booth where Pat Carroll and Michael Wallace are actually doing yoga stretches. Interesting sight, people in Mets jersey doing those yoga stretches along with them. And WCBS meteorologist Todd Glickman is here too, and he joins us. Todd.
Good morning. Let's do a little early edition of traffic and weather together. I came in here from Nassau County a little while ago. The traffic was just fine. And weather-wise, it is cloudy. It is cool. It is a perfect day to be here at Citi Field. As my colleague, Chief Meteorologist Craig Allen said yesterday, really not a good beach day. So come on out here, bring the family. It's really family-friendly. And if you've not yet been to Citi Field, this is my first time. It is absolutely spectacular. As a veteran of many dozens of games at Shea Stadium, I can say this is an incredible improvement. And once you see this field, you want to come back again and again. Now, we've got some great things going on at the health fair today. I'll be along with WCBS midday anchor Pat Farnack at 12 o'clock. We'll have another yoga demo. We'll be talking about obesity, nutrition, epilepsy. Then later on today, Jared Max, Tom Kaminsky, Craig Allen, Wayne Cabot, Steve Scott, and a host of other folks from WCBS News Radio. So please come on out. It's a beautiful day. We hope to see you. Reporting live from Citi Field, along with Ginny Casola, I'm Todd Glickman, WCBS 880 News.
All right, Todd, now I want to see you forecast while maintaining the lotus position. Can you work on that for me?
Well, I've got the radar out right now. There are a couple of showers around, but the good news is almost everything here is undercover, so no worries at all.
Copy that. Thank you, Todd Glickman and Jenny Casola at the CBS Radio Expo. WCBS time, 11:06. Let's turn.
You know, I don't remember that, but the first thing, if I was a news director, I would say, man, this guy is so personable. And that's what news directors like.
You're talking about Cameron, right?
I'm talking about you.
Oh,
Well, gentlemen, thank you. Both guys, this has been great. It's been a fun hour and 15 minutes. I really appreciate you coming on today, and I hope to see both of you at the AMS conference in Denver this January when we're
look forward to it.
Okay.
Yep. See you, Henry.
Well,
Thank you, Henry.
Sure. Thank you, guys. Well, as we close out today's program, we want to let you know that our next Weather Talk webinar will be coming up on November 10th. So just a few weeks from now, we'll feature Mark Moore. We'll speak about flood warning systems. So you want to take a look at the website. We'll have how to sign up for that. And before I forget, when signing off today, please take the survey that'll pop up on the top of your screen. Well, until we meet again, stay safe and healthy. This is Henry Regis for the rest of the CoCoRaHS team saying goodbye for now and wishing each of you a good rest of the month of October. Take care.